Beneath the ocean's shimmering surface lies a realm of silent predators, swift, powerful, and often unseen until it's too late. Shark attacks, while rare, strike with a ferocity that turns ordinary days into life-or-death struggles. From a seaplane crash in shark-infested waters to a fatal attack off the Great Ocean Road, these encounters reveal how a single misstep or moment of vulnerability can provoke nature's apex hunters. In this video, we uncover 6 terrifying stories of human encounters with deadly predators. The coastal waters off Gansbaai, South Africa, have earned their reputation as one of the world's most concentrated great white shark territories. Located roughly 180 kilometers southeast of Cape Town, this stretch of the Atlantic Ocean formed part of what marine biologists called Shark Alley, where the nutrient-rich waters and abundant seal populations created an ideal hunting ground for apex predators. On July 1, 2025, these same waters would transform a routine tourist flight into a nightmare that would haunt survivors for years to come. The seaplane excursion had been marketed as the ultimate shark-spotting adventure, offering Russian tourists Dmitry Volkov, Yelena Petrov, Sergei Kozlov, Natasha Romanov, and Boris Mikhailov breathtaking aerial views of great whites in their natural habitat. The single-engine Cessna 208 Caravan had completed dozens of similar flights without incident. Piloted by Captain Johan Wessels, a veteran with over 15 years of experience navigating the treacherous coastal conditions. At approximately 2:47 p.m., while circling at 800 feet above a particularly active feeding area, the aircraft's engine began producing irregular, sputtering sounds. Captain Wessels immediately attempted to radio the nearest airfield, but within seconds, the engine seized completely. The silence that followed was deafening as the plane began its inevitable descent toward the churning waters below. Wessels managed to level the aircraft for what pilots call a controlled water landing, but the choppy seas and strong crosswinds made precision impossible. The Cessna struck the water at a steep angle, its right wing catching a wave and sending the aircraft into a violent cartwheel. The impact shattered the passenger windows and twisted the fuselage, instantly flooding the cabin with frigid Atlantic water. Dmitry Volkov, a construction engineer from Moscow, found himself trapped beneath twisted metal and debris. His left shoulder had been dislocated during the crash, making it nearly impossible to swim effectively. Yelena Petrov, who had been seated near the emergency exit, managed to kick out the remaining glass from her window and pull herself onto a floating section of the wing. Her face bore multiple lacerations from the shattered glass, blood streaming into the salt water around her. Captain Wessels had sustained a severe head injury but remained conscious enough to help coordinate the survivors' escape from the sinking aircraft. Sergei Kozlov and Natasha Romanov clung to a detached passenger seat that had somehow remained buoyant, while Boris Mikhailov floated nearby, his right leg clearly broken and bent at an unnatural angle. The water temperature hovered around 14 degrees Celsius, cold enough to induce hypothermia within hours. More immediately concerning was the blood from their various injuries, which began to disperse in crimson trails through the water. What the survivors did not yet realize was that their distress calls were being monitored by a predator far more dangerous than the cold. A massive female great white shark, measuring approximately 4.5 meters in length, had been patrolling the area when the unusual commotion and scent of blood drew her attention. She had been hunting unsuccessfully for several hours and was in an increasingly aggressive state. The erratic splashing and panicked movements of the survivors triggered her predatory instincts. The first attack came without warning. Dmitry Volkov suddenly felt an enormous force slam into his injured shoulder, followed by excruciating pressure as powerful jaws clamped down on his upper arm. The shark's serrated teeth punctured through muscle and scraped against bone, causing him to scream in agony as he was pulled beneath the surface. Somehow he managed to strike the shark's snout with his good arm, causing it to release its grip and retreat momentarily. Yelena Petrov witnessed the attack from her position on the wing fragment and began frantically splashing water toward the shark, hoping to distract it from Dmitry. Her strategy backfired catastrophically. The increased commotion attracted the predator's attention, and within seconds, she felt the unmistakable sensation of being lifted from the water as the shark's jaws closed around her left thigh. The crushing force was unlike anything she had ever experienced, and she could feel her femur crack under the pressure. Captain Wessels, despite his own injuries, attempted to swim toward Yelena with a piece of debris to strike the shark. Before he could reach her, the massive predator released its grip and disappeared beneath the murky water, leaving Yelena floating in a growing pool of her own blood. The shark continued its assault, making calculated strikes on Sergei Kozlov's right calf and inflicting severe puncture wounds on Boris Mikhailov's uninjured leg. Each attack seemed methodical, as if the predator was testing the survivors rather than attempting to consume them. Natasha Romanov, who had remained relatively uninjured during the plane crash, found herself in the terrifying position of trying to keep the group together while watching helplessly as her companions were systematically mauled by the relentless predator. The rescue helicopter finally arrived at 5:23 p.m., nearly 3 hours after the initial distress call. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize the survivors, who had lost substantial amounts of blood and were showing severe signs of hypothermia and shock. All 5 tourists survived their ordeal, though Dmitry Volkov required multiple surgeries to repair the extensive damage to his shoulder and arm, and Yelena Petrov faced a lengthy rehabilitation process for her fractured femur and damaged thigh muscles. The incident prompted immediate reviews of safety protocols for seaplane tours operating in shark-populated waters, with authorities implementing mandatory emergency beacon systems and revised flight paths to avoid known predator feeding zones. The waters off New Smyrna Beach, Florida, had long held the unofficial title of the shark bite capital of the world. Located along the Atlantic coast of Volusia County, this stretch of coastline recorded more shark encounters than any other location globally, with an average of 15 incidents annually. The area's unique geography created perfect conditions for both marine predators and water sports enthusiasts, with shallow sandbars, murky water, and abundant bait fish drawing bull sharks dangerously close to shore. On September 14, 2018, these factors would converge in a terrifying encounter that would forever change one windsurfer's relationship with the ocean. Maya Torres, a 32-year-old graphic designer from Orlando, had been windsurfing for over 8 years and considered herself an experienced rider. She had driven to New Smyrna Beach that afternoon specifically to take advantage of the strong offshore winds that had been forecast for the weekend. The conditions appeared ideal, with sustained winds of 18 knots and wave heights of 3 to 4 feet, providing the perfect combination for an exhilarating session. Torres had launched her equipment from the beach near the Ponce de Leon Inlet around 3:30 p.m., when the afternoon sun was still high enough to provide good visibility. Her bright yellow sail cut through the choppy waters as she tacked back and forth parallel to the shoreline, staying within the designated swimming and surfing zones where lifeguards maintained watch. The trouble began approximately 45 minutes into her session when Torres attempted to execute a particularly aggressive jibe in the increasingly gusty conditions. As she leaned into the turn, a sudden wind shift caught her sail at an awkward angle, causing her to lose balance and fall backward into the water. The boom swung violently across the board, and the sail lines became twisted around her right ankle and lower leg. Torres found herself in an extremely vulnerable position, floating in chest-deep water roughly 100 meters from shore, with her leg firmly entangled in the rigging. The more she struggled to free herself, the tighter the lines seemed to become, cutting into her skin and restricting blood flow to her foot. Her frantic movements created significant splashing and commotion in the water, sending vibrations through the surf that would prove to attract unwanted attention. Several beachgoers on the nearby fishing pier noticed Torres's predicament and began pointing in her direction, though none initially realized the severity of her situation. The lifeguards on duty were dealing with a separate incident involving a young swimmer who had been caught in a rip current further down the beach. Unknown to Torres, a large bull shark had been patrolling the area for the better part of an hour, drawn by the scent of bait fish that had been driven into the shallows by the incoming tide. Bull sharks were notorious for their aggressive nature and their unusual ability to tolerate both saltwater and freshwater environments, making them one of the most dangerous species in coastal waters. This particular specimen measured approximately 8 feet in length and weighed an estimated 300 pounds. The combination of Torres's erratic movements, the blood from the cuts on her ankle caused by the rigging lines, and the murky water conditions created what marine biologists would later describe as a perfect storm for a case of mistaken identity. The bull shark, operating primarily on instinct and sensory input, perceived the struggling windsurfer as a wounded animal in distress. The attack occurred with lightning speed and devastating force. Torres felt a massive impact against her lower right leg, followed immediately by excruciating pressure as the shark's powerful jaws clamped down on her calf muscle. The animal's teeth, designed for crushing through bone and cartilage, penetrated deeply into her flesh, causing severe lacerations and immediately compromising the structural integrity of her lower leg. Torres later described the sensation as being caught in a mechanical vice that was simultaneously crushing and shredding her leg. The shark maintained its grip for what felt like an eternity, but was likely only 8 to 10 seconds, during which time Torres could feel her leg bones flexing under the tremendous pressure. The predator's attack strategy appeared to involve a test bite rather than a feeding attempt, as bull sharks often investigate potential prey before committing to a full assault. After the initial bite, the shark released its grip and retreated several meters, leaving Torres floating in a rapidly expanding cloud of her own blood. Two fishermen on the nearby pier, Ricardo Menendez and Thomas Kellerman, had witnessed the entire attack and immediately abandoned their equipment to rush toward the water. Menendez, a former Navy rescue swimmer, dove into the surf without hesitation, while Kellerman called emergency services and alerted the lifeguards to the situation. Menendez reached Torres within 90 seconds of the attack and found her conscious but in severe shock, still partially entangled in her windsurfing equipment. Working quickly to free her from the rigging, he applied direct pressure to the wounds on her calf while helping her stay afloat. The shark had inflicted multiple puncture wounds and several deep lacerations, but had not severed any major arteries. Kellerman had waded into the water carrying a surfboard, which he used to help transport Torres back to shore while scanning the surrounding water for any sign of the shark's return. Several other beachgoers formed a human chain to assist in bringing Torres safely to the beach, where paramedics were already waiting with emergency medical equipment. The attack had lasted less than 15 seconds from initial contact to rescue, but the damage was substantial. Torres suffered severe muscle trauma, multiple puncture wounds, and significant blood loss, requiring immediate surgery to repair the damaged tissue and prevent infection. She spent 4 days in the hospital and underwent 3 months of physical therapy to regain full use of her leg. The incident prompted local authorities to temporarily close the beach to water sports activities and led to increased monitoring of bull shark populations in the area during peak activity periods. The Great Ocean Road region of Victoria, Australia, stretches along some of the most spectacular and treacherous coastline in the Southern Hemisphere. Near Port Campbell, where the dramatic limestone cliffs of the 12 Apostles meet the Southern Ocean, the waters have historically attracted both tourists seeking marine wildlife encounters and great white sharks following seasonal seal migrations. This convergence of human activity and apex predator territory has occasionally resulted in tragic encounters. On March 8, 2019, these pristine waters would become the scene of one of Australia's most devastating shark attacks in recent memory. The Marine Wildlife Tour offered visitors the opportunity to observe seals, dolphins, and occasionally great white sharks from the safety of their purpose-built vessel, the Neptune Explorer. Captain Sarah McKinnon had been piloting these waters for 8 years and maintained an exemplary safety record, strictly adhering to guidelines that prohibited swimming or snorkeling in areas known for shark activity. Among the passengers that morning were Mark Dawson, a 41-year-old investment banker from Manchester, England, and his longtime friend Jason Whitmore, a 38-year-old photographer who had traveled to Australia specifically to document the region's marine life. The two men had been planning this trip for over 2 years and had specifically chosen the Port Campbell tour based on its reputation for shark sightings. The tour departed at 8:30 a.m. under ideal conditions, with calm seas, excellent visibility, and water temperatures around 18 degrees Celsius. McKinnon had positioned the vessel approximately 2 kilometers offshore from the seal colony at Seal Rocks, where great white sharks were known to hunt during the morning hours. The area's underwater topography featured steep drop-offs and rocky ledges that provided perfect ambush points for large predators. Within the first hour of the excursion, passengers had been treated to exceptional wildlife viewing, including a pod of bottlenose dolphins and several fur seals playing near the surface. The excitement reached its peak when McKinnon spotted a massive great white shark cruising slowly past the boat at a depth of approximately 10 meters. The animal appeared to be a mature female, estimated at over 4 meters in length, moving with the characteristic deliberate grace of an apex predator. Dawson became increasingly excited by the proximity of the shark, repeatedly expressing his desire to get a closer look and photograph the animal from water level. Despite McKinnon's clear warnings about the extreme danger of entering the water in a known hunting zone, and her explanation of the company's strict no-swimming policy, Dawson continued to press for permission to at least dip his feet over the side of the boat. The situation escalated when the Great White disappeared from view beneath the vessel. McKinnon immediately began scanning the surrounding water with polarized sunglasses, knowing that great whites often approach boats from below when investigating potential prey. She announced to all passengers that the shark was likely still in the immediate vicinity and reinforced the absolute prohibition against any water contact. Against all safety protocols and direct orders from the captain, Dawson made a fatal decision that would cost him his life. While McKinnon was distracted by radio communication with another tour boat reporting shark activity in the area, Dawson quietly moved to the stern of the vessel and lowered himself into the water, believing he could safely observe the shark while holding on to the boat's swim platform. The attack occurred within seconds of Dawson entering the water. The Great White, which had indeed been circling beneath the boat, immediately detected the unusual commotion and investigated. Whitmore, who had been setting up his camera equipment nearby, was the first to notice his friend's unauthorized water entry and shouted a warning. Just as the massive predator launched its assault, the shark struck from directly below with tremendous force, its jaws clamping down on Dawson's upper thigh and hip area. The impact lifted him partially out of the water before dragging him beneath the surface in a violent display of raw predatory power. The attack was swift and devastating, with the shark's serrated teeth inflicting catastrophic damage to major blood vessels and bone structure. Whitmore immediately jumped into the water despite the obvious danger, driven by desperation to save his friend's life. He managed to grab Dawson's arms and attempted to pull him back toward the boat while the shark maintained its grip. McKinnon threw a life ring, while other passengers grabbed boat hooks and emergency equipment to assist in the rescue attempt. The struggle in the water lasted approximately 30 seconds, during which time Whitmore fought frantically to free his friend from the shark's jaws. The predator's grip proved unbreakable, and the severity of Dawson's injuries became apparent as massive amounts of blood clouded the surrounding water. Despite Whitmore's heroic efforts and the quick response of other passengers, the damage inflicted by the Great White was simply too severe. McKinnon managed to retrieve both men from the water using the boat's hydraulic platform, but Dawson had already lost consciousness due to massive blood loss and trauma. Emergency medical procedures were immediately initiated by a retired paramedic who happened to be among the tour passengers, but the injuries to Dawson's femoral artery and hip joint were beyond the scope of first aid treatment. The Neptune Explorer immediately began emergency transit to the nearest harbor, while McKinnon radioed for a helicopter medical evacuation. A rescue helicopter was dispatched from Melbourne, but the nearest suitable landing area was over 40 minutes away by boat. Despite continuous CPR and emergency medical attention from the qualified passenger, Dawson succumbed to his injuries approximately 25 minutes after the attack. Whitmore sustained minor injuries during his rescue attempt, including several deep scratches on his arms and torso from the shark's rough skin, but his actions were credited with preventing the complete loss of Dawson's body to the predator. The traumatic experience left lasting psychological impacts on all witnesses, particularly Whitmore, who blamed himself for not preventing his friend's decision to enter the water. The incident prompted immediate reviews of safety protocols for marine tour operators throughout Victoria, with enhanced emphasis on passenger briefings and stricter enforcement of no-swimming policies. Marine biologists noted that the attack was consistent with typical great white hunting behavior in seal habitats, where the sharks rely on explosive ambush tactics to overcome prey. The Gulf of Mexico off the Louisiana coast has been home to hundreds of offshore oil drilling platforms since the 1940s, creating artificial reef systems that attract diverse marine life in the otherwise relatively barren deep-water environment. Located approximately 85 nautical miles southeast of Morgan City, the Deep Horizon, two platforms had been extracting crude oil from depths exceeding 5,000 feet since 2016. The massive structure, rising 200 feet above the ocean surface, had become an inadvertent habitat for various fish species, which in turn attracted larger predators, including tiger sharks. On August 22, 2021, This convergence of industrial activity and marine predators would result in a terrifying encounter that highlighted the hidden dangers faced by offshore workers. Mike Daniels, a 34-year-old maintenance technician from Baton Rouge, had been working on offshore rigs for over 9 years and was considered one of the most experienced crew members aboard the platform. His expertise in underwater welding and equipment maintenance made him invaluable for the complex repairs required to keep the drilling operation running smoothly. Daniels had completed hundreds of water-level maintenance tasks without incident, developing what he considered a healthy respect for the ocean environment surrounding the rig. The maintenance operation that morning involved cleaning and inspecting the platform's water intake filters, which had become clogged with debris and marine growth over the previous month. The task required Daniels to work from a floating maintenance platform positioned alongside the main structure, approximately 15 feet above the ocean surface. The job typically took 3 to 4 hours to complete and was considered routine maintenance that posed minimal risk to experienced personnel. Conditions that morning appeared ideal for the operation, with calm seas, light winds, and excellent visibility extending to a depth of nearly 30 feet. The water temperature registered 28 degrees Celsius, warm enough to make the work comfortable, but also creating optimal conditions for increased marine activity. Unknown to the crew, several large schools of Spanish mackerel and king mackerel had been feeding near the platform throughout the early morning hours, attracted by smaller baitfish that congregated around the structure's support pillars. The presence of these baitfish schools had been noticed by platform supervisor Carlos Mendoza during his routine morning inspection, but he considered them a normal occurrence that posed no threat to operations. What Mendoza could not have anticipated was that the feeding activity had also attracted a large female tiger shark, measuring approximately 12 feet in length and weighing an estimated 200 pounds. Tiger sharks are known for their opportunistic feeding behavior and their willingness to investigate unusual objects or disturbances in their territory. This particular specimen had been patrolling the area around the platform for several hours, drawn by the vibrations from the drilling equipment and the scent of fish oil and other organic materials that regularly leaked from the industrial operations. The accident occurred at approximately 10:45 a.m. when Daniels was positioning a heavy filter assembly using a hydraulic crane mounted on the floating platform. As he guided the equipment into position, a sudden mechanical failure caused the crane's support cable to snap, sending the 400-pound filter assembly plummeting toward the water. Daniels instinctively lunged forward to prevent the valuable equipment from sinking, but his safety harness became entangled with the falling machinery. The combined weight of Daniels and the filter assembly overwhelmed his safety line, causing him to plummet 15 feet into the Gulf waters with tremendous force. The impact stunned him momentarily, and he found himself struggling to stay afloat while still partially connected to the sinking equipment by his twisted safety harness. Fellow crew members Jimmy Rodriguez and Tony Castellanos witnessed the accident from the main platform and immediately began emergency rescue procedures. Rodriguez activated the man overboard alarm, while Castellanos prepared emergency diving equipment, though both men realized that immediate action was required to prevent Daniels from drowning. The commotion caused by Daniels' fall and his subsequent struggle to free himself from the equipment created significant splashing and vibration in the water, which immediately attracted the attention of the tiger shark that had been hunting nearby. The predator's acute sensory system detected the irregular movements and potential distress signals, triggering an investigative response. The attack came without warning as Daniels finally managed to cut himself free from the safety harness using his emergency knife. The massive tiger shark approached from below and behind, where Daniels could not see the approaching danger. The predator struck with devastating force, its powerful jaws clamping down on Daniels' right leg just below the knee. Tiger sharks possess some of the strongest bite forces in the ocean, capable of exerting pressure exceeding 3,000 pounds per square inch. The animal's teeth, designed for cutting through tough materials including turtle shells and whale bones, immediately penetrated through Daniels' heavy work boots and protective clothing, causing severe lacerations and crushing injuries to his lower leg. Rodriguez and Castellanos reacted immediately to their colleagues' screams for help, grabbing whatever tools were available to assist in the rescue attempt. Rodriguez threw a heavy wrench at the shark, while Castellanos lowered a rescue line toward the water. The impact of the wrench against the shark's head caused it to momentarily release its grip on Daniels' leg, providing a crucial opportunity for escape. Working together, the crew members managed to pull Daniels toward an emergency ladder mounted on the platform's support structure, while the tiger shark circled menacingly nearby. The predator made several additional approaches during the rescue operation, but was deterred by continued bombardment with tools and equipment thrown by crew members positioned on higher levels of the platform. The rescue operation lasted approximately 8 minutes from the initial attack to successfully extracting Daniels from the water. Emergency medical treatment was immediately administered by the platform's certified medical technician, who worked to control the severe bleeding from multiple puncture wounds and lacerations on Daniels's right leg and ankle. A Coast Guard helicopter was dispatched from New Orleans for emergency medical evacuation, arriving at the platform within 90 minutes of the initial distress call. Daniels remained conscious throughout the ordeal, though he had lost a significant amount of blood and was showing signs of shock and trauma from the attack. The incident prompted an immediate review and revision of safety protocols for all water-level maintenance operations, including the installation of shark deterrent devices and enhanced emergency response equipment on all offshore platforms. Daniels underwent multiple surgeries to repair the damage to his leg and required 6 months of rehabilitation before returning to light-duty work. The attack served as a stark reminder of the unexpected dangers that offshore workers face in an environment where industrial operations intersect with wild marine predators. The remote waterways of the Northern Territory represent some of Australia's most pristine and dangerous wilderness areas, where saltwater crocodiles have ruled as apex predators for millions of years. The Adelaide River, located approximately 60 kilometers east of Darwin, winds through dense tropical vegetation and mangrove swamps that provide ideal habitat for these massive reptiles. The river system has been home to some of the largest saltwater crocodiles ever recorded, with specimens exceeding 6 meters in length and weighing over 1,000 kilograms. On January 15, 2017, these ancient waters would claim the life of a tourist who underestimated the lethal capabilities of one of nature's most efficient killing machines. Emma Collins, a 29-year-old marine biology graduate student from Brisbane, had traveled to the Northern Territory with her husband James Collins, a 32-year-old environmental lawyer, to conduct research on estuarine ecosystem recovery following recent flooding events. The couple had been documenting water quality and wildlife populations as part of Emma's doctoral thesis on climate change impacts in tropical river systems. Their research had been officially approved, though they had been repeatedly warned about the extreme dangers posed by saltwater crocodiles in the region. The Adelaide River system had experienced unusually high water levels following heavy monsoon rains in December 2016, which had displaced many crocodiles from their normal territories and increased the likelihood of human-wildlife encounters. Local authorities had issued warnings advising extreme caution near all waterways, particularly in areas where crocodile activity had not previously been documented due to the recent flooding. Emma and James had established their research campsite near a bend in the river where the water appeared relatively shallow and clear, approximately 25 kilometers upstream from the main tourist areas. The location had been chosen specifically because preliminary surveys had not detected any crocodile activity in the immediate vicinity, though both researchers understood that the recent flooding had made such assessments unreliable. The temperature that afternoon had reached 38 degrees Celsius, with humidity levels exceeding 85%, creating oppressive conditions that made outdoor research work extremely challenging. Emma had been collecting water samples from various depths using specialized equipment when she began to show signs of heat exhaustion, including dizziness and excessive sweating. Against established safety protocols and her husband's objections, Emma decided to wade into the shallow water near the riverbank to cool herself down. James had repeatedly warned her about the dangers of entering any Northern Territory waterway, regardless of how safe it might appear. But Emma believed that the clear, shallow water posed minimal risk if she remained within a few meters of shore. James positioned himself on the muddy riverbank approximately 10 meters away from where Emma entered the water, maintaining visual contact while continuing to monitor their research equipment. The water initially appeared to be only knee-deep, and Emma reported that the cooler temperature provided immediate relief from the oppressive heat. Unknown to either researcher, a massive male saltwater crocodile measuring approximately 5.2 meters in length had been lying motionless in deeper water roughly 30 meters upstream. The animal had remained virtually invisible beneath the murky surface, employing the ambush hunting strategy that had made saltwater crocodiles the most successful large predators in the region for millions of years. Saltwater crocodiles are capable of remaining submerged and motionless for extended periods while monitoring potential prey, using specialized sensory organs to detect even minor vibrations in the water. Emma's entry into the river had immediately registered on the predator's sophisticated detection system, triggering a calculated stalking response. The attack occurred with the lightning speed and devastating force that characterizes saltwater crocodile predation. Emma had been in the water for approximately 3 minutes when the massive reptile launched its assault from the deeper channel, covering the distance to its target in a matter of seconds despite its enormous size. James watched in horror as the crocodile's massive jaws erupted from the water and clamped down on Emma's left leg with bone-crushing force. The impact was so violent that Emma was immediately pulled beneath the surface, disappearing into the murky water without even having time to scream for help. The characteristic hunting behavior of saltwater crocodiles involves what biologists call the death roll, where the predator grips its victim and rotates violently to disorient and drown the prey. James could see the water churning violently as the crocodile performed this deadly maneuver with his wife, creating a maelstrom of bubbles and disturbed sediment that obscured any view of what was happening beneath the surface. Driven by desperation and adrenaline, James immediately waded into the shallow water while shouting at the top of his lungs, hoping to distract or intimidate the crocodile into releasing Emma. He grabbed a heavy piece of driftwood and began striking the water's surface while screaming his wife's name. But the massive predator showed no response to his presence. The attack lasted approximately 90 seconds before the water returned to an ominous calm, with no sign of either Emma or the crocodile. James continued his frantic efforts to locate his wife, diving repeatedly into the murky water despite the obvious danger of a second attack. But the poor visibility and strong current made any effective search impossible. James immediately activated his emergency satellite beacon and attempted to call for help using his satellite phone. Though the remote location meant that emergency responders would require several hours to reach the scene, he spent the next 4 hours walking along the riverbank and calling Emma's name, hoping against all logic that she might have somehow escaped the crocodile's grip and made it to shore downstream. The first emergency responders arrived by helicopter at approximately 6:30 p.m., including police officers, parks and wildlife rangers, and a specialized crocodile management team. An extensive search operation was immediately initiated, involving underwater sonar equipment and experienced divers. But the river's depth and strong current made recovery efforts extremely challenging. The massive saltwater crocodile was located and destroyed by wildlife rangers the following morning, approximately 2 kilometers downstream from the attack site. Emma's body was recovered from the predator's stomach during the subsequent necropsy, confirming the worst fears of her family and colleagues. The tragic incident prompted renewed calls for stricter enforcement of crocodile safety guidelines and enhanced warning systems in remote research areas. Environmental authorities noted that the attack was entirely consistent with normal saltwater crocodile hunting behavior and emphasized that no waterway in the Northern Territory should ever be considered safe for human entry. James Collins established a memorial foundation in his wife's name to promote crocodile safety education and support research into non-invasive wildlife monitoring techniques that would reduce the need for researchers to work in close proximity to dangerous predators. Roughly 70 kilometers south of Port Lincoln in South Australia lies one of the world's premier destinations for observing great white sharks in their natural environment. On November 3, 2020, these pristine waters became the scene of a shocking incident that underscored the dangerous consequences of human recklessness around apex predators. The shark viewing expedition had been running successfully for over 15 years, offering tourists from around the world the opportunity to observe great white sharks from both the safety of reinforced cages and from specially designed viewing platforms on board their vessel, the Apex Explorer. Captain Trevor Harrison had been conducting these tours for 12 years and maintained an impeccable safety record, strictly adhering to protocols designed to protect both tourists and sharks from dangerous interactions. Among the passengers that morning was Sarah Collins, a 26-year-old social media influencer from Sydney who specialized in extreme wildlife encounters for her online platform. Collins had over 200,000 followers who regularly viewed her content featuring close encounters with dangerous animals around the world. She had specifically booked the tour, hoping to capture dramatic footage of great white sharks for her upcoming documentary series about Australia's most dangerous wildlife. The expedition departed Port Lincoln at 6:00 a.m. under ideal conditions, with calm seas, excellent visibility, and water temperatures around 16 degrees Celsius. The Apex Explorer reached the islands after a 2-hour journey, during which Harrison provided comprehensive safety briefings about great white shark behavior and the strict protocols that governed all interactions with these apex predators. Harrison positioned the vessel over a known aggregation site where great white sharks frequently congregated to hunt seals near the rocky ledges that surrounded the islands. The area's underwater topography featured dramatic drop-offs and cave systems that provided perfect ambush points for large predators hunting the abundant seal population. Within 30 minutes of arriving at the site, passengers were treated to exceptional shark activity, with multiple great whites ranging from 3 to 5 meters in length, cruising past the boat at various depths. The largest specimen appeared to be a mature female, estimated at over 4.5 meters in length, displaying the characteristic scarred skin and massive girth of an apex predator that had dominated these waters for decades. Collins became increasingly excited as she documented the shark encounters with multiple cameras and recording equipment, repeatedly expressing her desire to capture more dramatic footage that would distinguish her content from typical wildlife documentaries. Despite Harrison's clear warnings about maintaining safe distances and the absolute prohibition against any direct contact with the sharks, Collins continued to push for closer access to the animals. The situation escalated when the large female great white began showing increased interest in the boat itself, approaching to within 2 meters of the hull and swimming slowly past the viewing platform where passengers gathered to observe and photograph the marine life. Harrison recognized this behavior as typical investigative activity and assured passengers that the shark posed no threat, as long as everyone remained on board and followed established safety protocols. Collins saw an opportunity to capture what she described as groundbreaking footage of human-shark interaction and began positioning herself at the edge of the boat's viewing platform. Despite repeated warnings from Harrison and several other passengers about the extreme danger of her actions, Collins extended her camera equipment over the railing and leaned far out over the water to get closer shots of the massive predator. The great white shark continued its slow approach, displaying the characteristic curiosity that these apex predators often show toward unfamiliar objects in their territory. As the animal passed directly beneath the viewing platform, Collins made a catastrophic decision that would nearly cost her serious injury or worse. Against all safety protocols and direct orders from the captain, Collins reached down toward the water and attempted to touch the shark's dorsal fin as it glided past the boat. She later claimed that she believed the contact would be minimal and safe, demonstrating a complete misunderstanding of great white shark behavior and reflexes. The moment Collins's hand made contact with the shark's skin, the massive predator reacted with explosive speed and power. Great white sharks possess incredibly sensitive nervous systems and respond aggressively to any unexpected physical contact, particularly in areas near their dorsal fins, where they are most vulnerable to attack from other predators. The shark immediately turned toward the source of the disturbance and launched itself partially out of the water, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of serrated teeth designed for tearing through flesh and bone. Collins, who was still leaning over the railing, found her right hand directly in the path of the shark's defensive response. The great white's jaws closed on Collins's hand and wrist with tremendous force, estimated at over 4,000 pounds per square inch. The impact lifted her partially off the boat's deck as the shark's momentum carried it upward, creating a terrifying spectacle that was witnessed by all passengers and crew members. The attack lasted approximately 5 seconds before the shark released its grip and disappeared beneath the surface, leaving Collins hanging over the railing with severe injuries to her right hand and forearm. Harrison and several passengers immediately pulled her back onto the deck, while crew members initiated emergency medical procedures. The shark's teeth had inflicted multiple deep puncture wounds and several severe lacerations across Collins's hand, crushing 2 metacarpal bones and severing several tendons in her fingers. Massive bleeding from the wounds required immediate pressure bandages, and emergency medical treatment to prevent shock and further blood loss. Harrison immediately radioed for emergency medical evacuation, while the Apex Explorer began emergency transit back to Port Lincoln at maximum speed. A rescue helicopter was dispatched from Adelaide, meeting the vessel approximately halfway back to port to transfer Collins to a trauma center for emergency surgery. The incident was captured on video by multiple passengers and crew members, providing clear documentation of Collins's reckless behavior and the shark's defensive response. Marine biologists who reviewed the footage confirmed that the attack was entirely predictable given the circumstances, and emphasized that great white sharks will always defend themselves when touched or grabbed by unfamiliar objects. Collins underwent multiple surgeries to repair the damage to her hand and required extensive physical therapy to regain partial use of her fingers. The incident effectively ended her career as a wildlife documentarian and led to the implementation of enhanced safety measures and more stringent passenger screening procedures. Marine conservation groups used the incident to highlight the importance of respecting apex predators and maintaining safe distances during wildlife viewing activities, emphasizing that such encounters serve the best interests of both humans and sharks when conducted responsibly.